Ugh. I just tripped over in the intro. Well, welcome to my world of clutches. So on the bench we've got a couple of different clutches and flywheel setups. Basically we'll run through them and a bit of the plan for what we're going to run in my Commodore. So on the left we have the setup, the very left we have the setup that I was running. The car's an L67, which is basically a factory supercharged Ecotec Holden motor, 3.8 litre supercharged with an Eaton M90 on the top. And what I did originally when I did the manual conversion, it's a Calais, so it was originally automatic. When I did the manual conversion, I had a T5 gearbox out of a VR, the flywheel, and a PBR heavy duty clutch to go with it. And that was great for quite a while when the engine just had rockers and a small boost upgrade and so on. It was a great daily, and it's lasted all the way through to now where I've got a camshaft, boost, E85 and so on. So this is the flywheel, this is the Buick Flywheel, standard cast. There's the GM part number on the back and the standard Buick counterbalance weight.
Close shot.
And I sent it off to be match balance to the flex plate. So this is a standard L67 flex plate. Bolts to the crankshaft through here, and then through these holes here it bolts to the automatic torque converter. So in Australia, I think in the world anyway, the L67, which is a supercharged 3.8 Commodore engine, was only in automatic, so they only had this flex plate. So what they do is they spin this up on a balance machine, record the out of balance, the factory out of balance, and you can see the weights here, and they transfer that out of balance onto the flywheel that you want to run. So the L67 actually has a different counterbalance in the flex plate and in the harmonic balancer compared to an Ecotec. And you can see there's an extra bit of metal here that's welded in. So there's the standard balancing weights. And then at the factory they spin up the whole rotating assembly and they adjust the balance, and you can see that with the drilled holes here where they've adjusted it. Yep. Okay, so we get the standard factory balance for that engine and we replicate that onto the flywheel that we want to run. So this is the Buick Flywheel, and you can see here where we've got, it's pretty heavy, yeah. Here where you've got the factory counterbalance cast in, and then on the front, when they've done the balancing, you can see down here they've drilled an additional series of holes. So if you remove more weight on this side, it's equivalent to adding weight on this side, and when we match it up, it's roughly the same balance as the L67. Well, it is the same balance as the flex plate in terms of out of balance mass. So that was the clutch. It ran for probably, it's about 10 years old and 6 years behind an L67. You can see the flywheel before it went behind the L67 was machined, and there's not really a big lip there, which means it hasn't slipped a lot, hasn't been driven too harshly, and it survived really well. This is the pressure plate. It's the PBR heavy duty pressure plate. And you can see here there's not much of a ridge worn in, and there's not really any sort of hot spots on the clutch as well, so held up pretty well. Mind you, there wasn't much clutch dumping or anything like that. It's been to a couple of track days, and that's when it started slipping a little bit in recent times. So that's the pressure plate, and that's the friction disc. So you can see the friction disc, there's still these grooves in here, but at the extremities it's starting to wear down. On both sides, you can see there the groove is missing here.
Yep.
So had a pretty good life out of this clutch. You can run a standard heavy duty clutch behind an L67 as long as you drive sensibly and your power is pretty moderate. It makes for a really fun driver. So that's the standard. Some time ago I saw a bit of a deal. So I picked it up. Here's another sort of heavy duty setup. You can see this pressure plate's in much better condition. You can still see the factory machine marks. There's no step at all on there. And inside the pressure plate here you can see the factory part number for the spring assembly. So we know this one hasn't been modified. Some heavy duty companies, like they do, is they actually drill out these rivets and they fit an aftermarket or a third party spring assembly in there to increase the clamp load, or they modify the pivot point to increase the clamp load on the pressure plate. So that's a modified one, and that came with a 5-puck unsprung friction disc. I haven't actually run this, but the pucks are in pretty good condition. I probably won't run it because it's unsprung. I don't want to have that shock loading going through my T5 in the diff. So that's just there till I decide what I'm going to do with it. Next up, we have a aftermarket flywheel and a modified cover assembly with a 6-puck brass button sprung center friction disc. So this friction disc is an Extreme brand. You can see it's worn right down to the rivets. I got this from a mate of mine. So what the current plan is, I'll send this off to be reconditioned. They'll put new pucks on there because the center is in quite good condition. I'll get a new cover plate. You can see here, this is a cover plate, it's red. This was modified by Western Clutches in St Mary's. And you can see, if you look closely, they've actually modified the spring assembly and replaced these rivets and painted it red. So red cover is Western Clutch in St Mary's. You can see the consequence, I guess, of running a brass button clutch. It's quite heavy wear on the friction surfaces, so it's quite a step there, which means this pressure plate's pretty much toast. This is the matching flywheel. It is an aftermarket flywheel done by NPC. You can see NPC brand on the back. It looks to be some sort of universal counterweight design on there and there. And on the face, you can see that it's also got a step, so it's going to have to be machined. But this is also universal pattern drilling. So you can fit a standard 10-inch or 255mm clutch disc, or you can fit a 10.5-inch clutch disc on there, which I believe NPC came up with that upgrade. So I'll have a closer look at that in a second. But what you also notice on the back of this is you'll see heat marks. So there's heat marks in here. That's the advantage of having a nice billet material, is you can tell if there's any discoloration to heat. So when this is resurfaced, we'll have to check really carefully for any heat cracks in the surface of the flywheel. Okay, the last assembly we have here is an actual 10.5-inch assembly. So it's got the same flywheel, same part number, with a bit of different drillings. You should notice that different drillings on there. This one here was run behind a Buick 3800, so that's the 3.8 litre V6 engine fitted to VN Series 2 through to VR. That's the Buick 3800, that's what we call it here. And this was fitted to an Ecotec. You can see on the back the difference in balance. So this one has a really light balance mass bolted to it, and no other balancing drillings on the back or the front. Put that down. This one here has a much heavier balance mass on the back, as well as counterweight drilling on the front there. So this one I believe was behind an Ecotec. And also see, this is the 10.5-inch clutch cover plate or pressure plate. You can also see the difference in diaphragm fingers here. I believe these are either an LS1 or a XR6 turbo pressure plate. Can't quite remember. But yeah, that's a 10.5-inch upgrade. And the first time I got this off, I was running it with a standard organic clutch friction disc, and you can see it's quite torn up from heat damage and slipping through here. So the plan for the current engine that I'm running, which is an L67 with a 3.2-inch pulley, E85, XP hot cam and so on, is to run this flywheel here, have that resurfaced and balanced to match the flex plate, along with an upgraded or brand new cover with an upgraded clamp load and a reconditioned friction disc. So this is the standard 10-inch friction disc. That will run, see me through till I finish building my new engine, which will be something a bit more out of the ordinary than your standard bolt-on or standard off-the-shelf mod L67, and we'll see that when the time comes. And I'll run this clutch with a 10.5-inch, most likely a 6-puck brass button clutch with an upgraded cover, or possibly a twin plate. I'm not sure yet, but most likely a single plate with the same setup, just a bit larger that I'm running at. Depends how successful this setup is. So there you go. That's my world of clutches at the moment, and I'll keep you posted.